Sinister secrets exposed, 7 spine-chilling unsolved mysteries that haunt until today as darkness blanketed the small suburban homes of Ohio. A shroud of unease settled over the Johnson family. Mark Johnson, a diligent worker, clocked into his night shift while his wife, Sarah, nestled on the couch, keeping company with a flickering movie from the past. Outside, the usual hum of crickets sang a deceptive lullaby, comforting yet ominous. Down the hall, their daughter Emily played quietly, blissfully unaware of the lurking terror just outside their door. Yet, that night would not remain ordinary. At the stroke of midnight, soft thuds pierced the air, like muffled footsteps creeping closer. Sarah shrugged at first, blaming raccoons diving into their trash. But when Emily emerged from her room, eyes wide with fear, her words chilling, the sight of a shadowy figure haunting the porch light sent an icy shiver through Sarah's spine. The familiar night sounds twisted into echoes of dread. How could this be happening in their peaceful neighborhood? The next morning, dread pooled into panic when they discovered an anonymous note, hastily scrawled. It warned them to leave. Mark returned from work, exhaustion etched on his face, only to find Sarah white as a ghost. "We need to get out of here," she uttered, her voice trembling. The neighborhood they loved, with friendly smiles and picket fences, transformed into something sinister. When Mark started digging, he unearthed an unsettling truth, a string of disappearances that turned his stomach like a deep tide pull. In his quest to protect his family, he spoke to neighbors, hoping for comfort, but instead faced chilling revelations hidden behind what once felt like safe walls. Each house masked horrors that dwelled beneath decorative facades: an abandoned swing set, a battered fence, glass shards glistening on the ground. Mark's heart raced as Emily's drawings spiraled into haunting visions, dark figures, eyes that seemed to follow him, illuminating the fractured bond in their world. Was the danger from within their neighborhood or from some unknown terror lurking outside? Then came an unmistakable shock. Emily mentioned a name connected to an old tragedy, the shadow's identity carrying a weight that wrapped around Mark's chest like an iron vice. As they raced against time to uncover the layers of their haunted past, a storm brewed outside, wrapping their home in an uneasy stillness. The winds howled like wailing spirits. And just when they thought maybe they had a shred of hope, a soft knock rattled their door, echoing like a death toll. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Mark froze, heart pounding, sweat trickling down his spine. The phone rang, slicing through the tense air like a knife. An unknown voice whispered, familiar yet chilling, "Have you found what you're looking for?" The room felt like ice, the air so thick it was hard to breathe. They were wrapped in a history that demanded acknowledgement, yet now it seemed to be demanding something far more sinister. Would they uncover the truth before it was too late, or would they become another chapter in their town's haunting tale? Mark stumbled back, nearly knocking over a chair in the dim living room. His fingers trembled as he clutched the phone, the voice still echoing in his mind like a persistent nightmare. He instinctively glanced at Sarah, who stood frozen, wide-eyed, clutching Emily's drawings, each one a grotesque depiction of their growing fear. Who is this?" Mark managed to choke out, his voice hoarse with anxiety. The voice responded, low and raspy, "It won't matter if you don't leave before midnight. They'll come for you, just like they did before." The line went dead. Silence wrapped around them, broken only by the sound of rain starting to pelt against the windows. Mark dropped the phone, heart racing. The storm outside transformed from a mere occurrence into a cacophony of dread, echoing the turmoil building within. Sarah's voice broke through. What did they mean? Who were they talking about? He turned back to her, desperation clawing at him. "I don't know. But we have to leave. Now." Panic surged as he darted to grab Emily's jacket from a hook by the door. He could feel it, the thick presence of impending doom coiling around their home like a serpent. Emily lingered in the doorway, her innocent gaze transfixed on the rainfall, lost in a world marked by shadows. "Emily! Come on!" Mark urged, snapping her out of her trance. The tremors in his voice pierced through her daze. As they stepped outside, the wind howled through the trees, a bone-chilling bray that seemed to mock their urgency. The streets were nearly deserted, the usual charm of their neighborhood now painted with desperation and fear. Mark's heart thudded loudly as they raced toward their car, parked under a flickering streetlight that struggled against the darkness, but something felt wrong. An unease festered in the pit of his stomach. He glanced back at their house, the shadows bending and twisting unnaturally against the windows. It felt like the house was watching, waiting. "Daddy?" Emily's soft voice pulled at him. She stood still, her small hand reaching up to point. "What's that?" Mark turned, a chill running through him as his breath caught in his throat. At the end of the street, illuminated by the dim glow of the light, stood a figure. Tall, shrouded in a long coat, it seemed to move impossibly, gliding rather than walking. The face concealed beneath a wide-brimmed hat remained shrouded, giving it an otherworldly presence. "Run!" Mark shouted, grabbing Emily's hand, bolting toward the car. The pounding of his heart matched the thrum of the rain, but fear coursed through him, faster than their legs could carry them. As they dove into the vehicle, Mark fumbled with the keys, mind racing. Get out, get to safety. Just then, the headlights flickered to life, casting shifting shadows in the downpour. He turned to see Sarah's face twisted with terror. "Mark, we have to go back. We can't leave them," she implored, wanting to return to the safety of their home, wholly unaware of the horror watching them. "What do you mean, who?" Mark shouted, feeling the grip of fear tightening around his throat. Before she could answer, the figure reached the edge of the light, standing motionless, its presence saturating the air with dread. Mark's blood ran cold as he glimpsed a flash of recognition on the figure's hidden face. "Emily! Get down!" he yelled as he turned the ignition key frantically. The engine sputtered before roaring to life, yet a piercing scream echoed in his mind, urging him to stay. He glanced in the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the figure, its head tilted slightly, watching them waiting. With a jolt, they sped away, rain pounding against the roof as the house faded into the darkness behind them. But the figure lingered, a phantom haunting their escape. "What do we do now?" Sarah's voice trembled as fear coursed through her. "Find out who or what that is," Mark said, determination igniting within him. They had crossed a line, and now, somehow, the truth awaited just beyond the shadows of their forgotten past. But unknown to them, the clock was ticking, the storm only a prelude to the real tempest that was about to descend upon them. What horrors did their flight unravel, and would they be able to confront the darkness that awaited them next? The car sped down the rain-soaked streets, tires slicing through puddles that mirrored the chaos in their minds. Mark's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel as he fought to control his surge of panic. The figure's shadow loomed in his thoughts, dark and unyielding. "Mark, what do we do?" Sarah's voice trembled, pulling him out of his spiral of fear. "Just keep your eyes on Emily," he replied, glancing at their daughter. Emily sat in the back seat, her wide eyes reflecting the flickering streetlights, oblivious to the terror threading through the air. The innocence of childhood in stark contrast to the horror looming over them. "What were you going to say?" Mark pressed, the urgency in his voice cutting through the tension. "Before you wanted to go back," Sarah hesitated, eyes darting to the rearview mirror, scanning for movement, for that figure. I thought it was someone from our past. Someone we shouldn't have left behind." "What do you mean? Who?" Mark's heart pounded as he wrestled with the fear of the unknown, the fear of their own history creeping back like dark smoke. Before she could answer, something slammed against the rear of the car, jarring it violently. He swerved, fighting to regain control as a rush of adrenaline flooded his veins. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," Sarah shouted. "Emily, hold on." Mark's pulse raced as he caught a glimpse of the figure again, now keeping pace with them. It glided effortlessly, shadow-like, hands hidden in the depths of its coat. The sound of rain drummed relentlessly against the metal, merging with the dread that thickened the air. "We have to lose it," Mark yelled, veering onto a side street, tires screeching, spraying water in all directions. The figure didn't falter. It followed, its movements hauntingly fluid, like a predator that had no need for speed. Sarah continued to glance back, her face pale with fear. "Do you think it's?" she began, voice quaking. Stop. Just drive, Mark snapped, bile rising in his throat. A siren broke the symphony of chaos. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, mingling with the downpour. Relief flooded through him. Look! Police! We're saved! But as they rounded a corner, Mark's heart sank. The lights were off, the police car sat abandoned, crumpled against a lamppost, its door ajar. The world felt increasingly surreal and sinister. It's a trap, Mark whispered, dread curling around his gut. A cold sweat trickled down his back. Just then, Emily's soft voice broke the silence. Daddy? What is it, sweetheart? That man, I think I know him. Instantly, the air turned ice cold. Mark and Sarah exchanged horrified glances. What do you mean, Emily? Mark's voice trembled, a horrible sense of foreboding tightening around him. He comes to my dreams, she murmured, her small face pale, innocence stripped away. He said if we don't go back he would take me. A shriek of wind whipped through the open window, howling like a ghost from beyond. Mark slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt. They stared ahead, paralyzed by the darkening storm and the reality of their daughter's words. Emily, you can't listen to him, Mark said, trying to sound reassuring. But Emily shook her head, her eyes wide with an understanding that twisted his stomach. He said he will come for me, tonight. Mark wanted to scream. It felt like the ground was collapsing beneath them. He reached back to hold her hand, but a flicker caught his eye in the side mirror. The figure was closer now, crawling with malevolence, face still concealed but radiating an aura of undeniable evil. Drive! He roared, drive now! As Sarah slammed the foot on the gas, they surged forward into the night, the figure fading from view but the weight of its presence heavy in the air. But as they drove into the unknown, how long could they outrun a darkness rooted in their past? And what threads of terror awaited them in the deeper shadows that lay ahead? The rain lashed the sides of the car like 1,000 icy fingers, clouding their vision and mixing with the heat of their panic. Mark's foot pressed harder on the gas, the engine growling as they barreled down the deserted road. The streets lay abandoned, yet the weight of that shadow felt ever present, creeping along the void with unrelenting focus. Mark, where do we go? Sarah screamed, glancing nervously at the rearview mirror. The emptiness behind them only amplified their fear. Just, keep going. The words felt hollow. They were trapped, every direction marred by dark memories. He felt the pulse of dread wash over him, tightening his throat. Mark dared to look back. Nothing. The figure had vanished. But the stillness draped over him like a heavy blanket. He won T. Let us go, Mark muttered, more to himself than to Sarah. He's toying with us. Emily, now fidgeting with her seatbelt, broke the weight of silence. What's his name? Her voice was eerily calm, contrasting sharply with the chaos around them. What? Mark turned around, his mind racing. That man, he said his name is something with a J, Emily stuttered. Don't listen to him, Emily. Sarah shouted, leaning back to grab their daughter's hand. We need to focus. But the darkness was creeping into the corners of their minds. Mark could see it, like the fog that blanketed the night. Rumbling thunder echoed in the distance, and he felt the pressure of it surrounding them. What if we just go back? The thought slipped out, weighing heavy on his tongue. Are you insane? Sarah shot back, eyes wide with panic, glancing back at Emily who was now staring blankly ahead. What if that's exactly what he wants? A low growl reverberated through the air. The engine choked, sputtering ominously. Mark's heart dropped. Not now. He pressed harder on the accelerator, praying the car wouldn't T-stall. Come on, come on. The headlights flickered, then dimmed, struggling against the encroaching shadows. Ahead, the road turned, leading them toward the mouth of an old tunnel, worn down and covered in grease and grime. The idea of going through it felt like stepping into an abyss. In spite of Sarah's protests, Mark pressed on, the darkness in the tunnel swallowing the car whole as the rain turned into a relentless torrent. A shiver crawled up his spine. He could feel it, the pressure bearing down, the feeling of being pursued. We need to get out of this storm. he shouted. Emily's voice cut through the tense air. "Daddy, you have to go into the tunnel." "What?" "No." Sarah gasped, her eyes darting to Emily. "How could you say that? It'll lead us nowhere. Please, Daddy." Emily insisted, her voice rising high above the storm. "I can see him. He's waiting." Mark slammed on the brakes, the tires shrieking in protest as they skidded to a halt, the tunnel yawning before them like the mouth of a beast. A primal instinct urged him to flee, but another, the nagging voice of desperation, pulled him closer. "What do you see, Em?" he asked, dread nesting in his gut as their eyes locked. "He says if you don't, he will come for me." A chill swept through the car. Murmurs of a sinister promise echoed in Mark's mind. They were decisions that might rip apart their fragile attempt at safety. "Mark," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with a combination of fear and heartbreak. "We can't let it take her." But before Mark could respond, the shadows at the edge of the tunnel flickered. Something moved within, and the air grew thick with malevolence. "Please, Dad." Emily's voice faltered just as something darted across the tunnel's back wall, deep, menacing, like the rush before a storm. Mark felt his breath hitch. Sarah, in that moment, as their eyes locked, the decision felt impossible. But from deep inside the tunnel, a low rumble echoed, hinting at the truth waiting to be unveiled. "Whatever we do, we have to do it now," he murmured, doubt seeping into his words. Would they face the unknown together, or would they risk it all to escape? The darkness loomed, thickening with every second they hesitated. And as thunder cracked above them, with a deafening roar, the haunting words echoed, "He'll come for you when you least expect it." Forging a path into the murk ahead, Mark gripped the wheel, preparing to plunge into the depths of shadows that threatened to devour them whole. What awaited them as they crossed that threshold? The answer was shrouded in terrifying uncertainty. The car jerked as Mark slammed on the gas, the engine roaring defiantly against the storm. Inside the tunnel, the shadows writhed, alive with every heartbeat. Water dripped from overhead, echoing like sinister laughter in the darkness. "Go faster," Sarah urged, her eyes darting around, searching for anything, anyone, who might help them. But the stone walls bore no witness to their flight. It was just the three of them against whatever lay ahead. A flicker caught Mark's eye, a swath of movement at the edge of the tunnel. He squinted, heart racing as he fought the urge to look back. "Don't! Keep your eyes forward," he ordered, though fear gripped his voice, betraying his resolve. "Daddy!" Emily squeaked, her small hands trembling in her lap. "He's hungry." A chill filled the air, staggering the breath in Mark's chest. "Who?" The question hung like fog, thick and suffocating. "The man. He's waiting. He wants something." Her voice trailed off, retreating into a silence that felt like a lead weight. He couldn't afford to let panic envelop him. "Don't say that, Em." "We're going to be fine," Mark replied, though doubt bit at him. The car's headlights flared, briefly illuminating a scrawled message on the wall, "He knows your name." A spike of terror lanced through him. Mark didn't have to read it twice to understand its implications. "Turn around. We can't do this," Sarah shouted, gripping the dashboard as if it were a lifeline. "No!" Mark barked back, fighting against the gravity of despair clawing at their resolve. "We go through." The flickering light succumbed to the dark, plunging them back into shadow. The deep growl morphed into a howl, cycling through the airwaves like a predator feeding on their fear. Mark could feel it clawing at his mind, just like that ominous shadow lurking at the edge of the road. "Daddy, it's here!" Emily shrieked, her innocent voice dancing on the edge of madness. He shot a look at her, the pale glow of her face illuminating fear etched in wide eyes. The car rattled, and the engine sputtered in protest, seeming to echo their collective dread. Mark pressed harder on the gas, adrenaline swarming his veins, but the tunnel felt like a void dragging them into despair. A flash of movement. Something slithered over the back seat, a dark shape almost melding into the fabric. Mark's heart raced as he instinctively turned to the rearview mirror, the reflection offering only a distorted image of the road they traveled. "No! Look out!" Sarah screamed. A figure materialized in the dim light, its features obscured by a shifting veil of darkness. Was it a man? A beast? It moved, inching closer, and as he strained to see, every rational thought shattered. He could feel eyes burning into him, calculating, hungry, and all too knowing. Mark! Sarah's voice tore through the air, frantic. Do something. Hold on. He gasped, steering sharply to avoid the shadow. They bounced painfully along the rough terrain, the car jerking as it clung to the desperate path. But they weren't safe. The air grew heavier, brimming with an energy that felt like a storm before the lightning strikes. Don't let it take me, Daddy, Emily whispered, her voice cracking like glass. Nothing is going to take you, Em. I promise. Mark shouted, though his voice trembled. The truth was digging its claws into his gut, telling him this was all a mistake. The rhythmic thumping against the car grew louder, a sinister tattoo against their hopes. What does he want? I don't know. Mark screamed, feeling the weight of uncertainty crashing down. What does he want? Your name, Emily said softly, almost sweetly, yet it felt like an accusation. The growl morphed into a laugh echoing darkly around them, reverberating through the space, a cruel jest that sent shivers down Mark's spine. The tunnel seemed to constrict around them, the world outside fading into nothingness. In that moment of isolation, as fear strangled reality, Mark realized the truth. They were not only fighting the darkness ahead. They were confronting the darkness that lived within them, the whispered secrets of a past he thought he could forget. Just drive. Sarah wept, her grip tightening on Emily as if shielding her from the monster. And with the engine sputtering like a dying breath, Mark surged forward into the blind abyss, the shadows gnashing closer with every desperate second. As they plunged deeper into the tunnel, a voice echoed ominously in Mark's mind, promising that the end was only the beginning. What they'd uncover in darkness had only begun to unfold. Was he truly ready to face what awaited them as they drove further into the unknown? The tunnel gaped wider as they sped deeper, swallowing the car whole. Mark could feel it breathing, its dark walls pulsing like a living beast. The shadows twisted and turned, as if reaching out to pull them back into their past. Mark, you need to stop. Sarah shouted, her face pale and raw with terror. This is insane. We should VE turned around. No. He snapped, feeling the panic rise in his throat. There's got to be a way out. We can't lose hope. But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him like a relentless parasite. The tunnel felt endless, stretching into a void that whispered of danger. Why does he want your name? Emily's small voice broke through the chaos. Maybe he'll go away if you give it to him. Mark could hardly breathe. No, Em, we're not doing that. I'd never. Hey. Sarah's scream shattered the moment. Look. A flicker of light pierced the darkness ahead, shattering their senses. Mark clutched the wheel tighter, his knuckles white. Was it salvation, or more danger? Hurry. We need to. The car jolted violently. Something had brushed against the roof, a chilling sensation that climbed straight down Mark's spine. Get down. He ducked low instinctively, heart racing, the tunnel slapping his senses with every tremor. The light loomed closer, flickering uncertainly. They were approaching some sort of opening. But what would greet them on the other side? Mark! Sarah cried, her voice pierced with desperation. We can't just sit here. We need to move. Summoning all the courage he had left, Mark slammed on the gas one final time. The engine roared defiantly, the roar echoing off the walls, reverberating into the darkness like a battle cry. As they shot forward, the light swallowed them completely, only to reveal a wall. A cold, unyielding slab of stone. Panic rose like bile in his throat. He swerved to the side, narrowly missing the impact, sending the car careening toward the narrow mouth of an archway cloaked in more shadow. What the hell? Sarah shouted, gripping the seat. Where are we supposed to go? They'll find us. Emily whimpered, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. Shut your eyes. Mark commanded, heart pounding. He could feel the weight of dread not only from the shadows but something heavier, lying just beneath the surface. The archway opened to a small alcove, the walls adorned with ancient symbols that seemed to writhe and twist as if they were alive. Something flickered in the corners of his vision, a dark form creeping closer. "Mark!" Sarah yelled, and her scream seemed to awaken the darkness. Shadows coiled around them, sinister, alive, closing in. He could barely think. Panic turned his thoughts to static as he noticed a thin, vibrating hum echoing in the small space. Something from within the walls was whispering, calling. A haze pulled him toward the walls, outlined in a pattern that felt all too familiar. The symbols shimmered, pulsing in time with his heartbeat, like they were drawing him in. "No! Don't touch it!" Sarah screamed, but he felt drawn, compelled to reach out. His fingers brushed against the symbols. In that instant, the world tilted. Pain blazed through him, memories exploded like fireworks behind his eyes. A voice, deep and twisted, wrapped around him. "Your name? You must give me your name, Mark." He gasped, the word choking him. "I'm Mark." The laughter surged, and the shadows pressed closer, suffocating. "Mark, don't!" Sarah cried, but it was too late. Cold darkness enveloped him, pulling him into a suffocating embrace. Everything became silent, and then he heard it, a soul-chilling whisper. "You've made a bargain now." The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a tunnel. It was a threshold. Before he could process what that meant, Emily's terrified voice broke through the darkness. Daddy, gripped by a fresh wave of fear, Mark turned to face whatever emerged from the dark, knowing they were all teetering on the edge of a nightmarish truth, and then nothing more. Only the heavy, looming silence that promised horrors yet to come. What had they traded for their freedom? What hidden cost lay waiting for them in the bleakness ahead? Mark gasped, the weight of his surroundings settling heavily on his chest. Beneath the suffocating silence, he could almost hear the echoes of the laughter, a sinister melody that danced in the shadows, mocking his desperation. He squeezed his eyes shut, as if the dark might dissolve into light. But reality was more cruel. It pulsed around him, thick and palpable, breathing and alive. "Daddy!" Emily's voice quivered, a fragile thread woven through the ominous stillness. Mark opened his eyes, straining to see her. Her face was lost in the encroaching darkness, but he could make out the silhouette of her small frame huddled in the corner of the back seat. He twisted around, scanning frantically for Sarah, heart pounding like a war drum. The darkness thickened, wrapping around them, squeezing the air from his lungs. "Emily, I'm right here," Mark managed to say, forcing his voice calm. But within, his heart raced, a streetlight flickering dangerously in a storm. Suddenly, the symbols on the walls began to glow, casting an eerie luminescence over the alcove. Mark felt the pulse of energy from them reverberating through his very bones, a sensation creeping closer, an ancient force that seemed to recognize him, to beckon him in. "Mark!" Sarah exclaimed, her voice breaking through the gathering gloom. "What did you say to it?" She was still trying to comprehend what had happened, eyes wide and wild. "You shouldn't have. I didn't mean to." He fired back, frustration mixing with his fear. "I just wanted to find a way out." The symbols flared brighter as if they had their own pulse, their intricate patterns weaving into the air, forming forms that began to swirl around them. He felt dizzy, and his stomach churned with dread. The taste of metal filled his mouth, sharp and bitter, echoing the memories that now clawed at the edges of his mind, the past he thought he had buried, the things he'd rather forget. "Whatever you've done, it's not over," Sarah warned, her voice a rasping breath, punctuated with fear. Mark turned back to her, desperation tightening his chest. "We have to get out. We can't stay here." With a shaky breath, he lunged toward the archway, a thin veil of hope flickering in his heart. The pulsating light landing on the stone seemed to invite him, but the shadows shifted unnaturally, groaning with discontent. A wave of ice surged down his spine, compelling him to stay. A deeper instinct cautioned him about crossing that threshold again. Emily's whimper was tangible, it throbbed like a heartbeat. He turned. She was looking past him, eyes wide. "Something's coming." A dark figure emerged from the depths of the shadows, its form indistinct yet oppressively present. The air thickened, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. It loomed larger, clawing its way into the flickering light. Mark gripped the side of the car, fingers trembling, every nerve alive with fright. "Stay back." he shouted, heart racing as it stepped into the glow. The figure paused, head tilting as if studying him. Mark could feel its gaze, penetrating and cold. A voice filled the alcove, distorted yet familiar. "You promised, Mark. You called to me, I didn't mean it. Just let us go." Mark pleaded, the desperation leaking through his words like water through a cracked dam. The figure drew closer, faceless and swirling, shadows wrapping around it, whispering secrets of the past that he could feel creeping into his mind. Memories surfaced, fragments of forgotten dread from a childhood long buried. Names, voices, visions of a life he tried desperately to escape began to rush forth. "Your name is yours no longer," it said, its tone dripping with dread. "You've surrendered it. Stop." "No!" Mark cried, but the darkness surged forward, invading his thoughts, pulling him into the abyss. He felt his mind slipping away, but through the fog, he caught glimpses of Sarah and Emily, horrified and frozen like statues. He needed to break free, to resist whatever phantom force was ensnaring him, to protect them. "Mark!" they yelled in unison, rupturing his focus. With a surge of will, he squeezed his eyes shut again, battling the memories. "I will not give in. I will fight." The moment stretched, the shadows pressed against him with their unyielding weight, an icy breath drawing closer. Suddenly, the darkness convulsed. Mark opened his eyes, a desperate, primal energy charging through him. The alcove trembled, and the cymbals pulsed wildly. And then, the walls began to crack, jagged lines splicing through the darkness. A deep rumble echoed, shaking the very ground they stood upon. "Run, now!" he screamed, and they all bolted toward the shaking archway, the shadows howling in anguish behind them. But as they raced forward, a final whisper collided with Mark's ears, deep and chilling. The bargain is only the beginning. What lay beyond the archway would change everything. Would they escape, or would they unleash something far worse? The air crackled with tension as they stumbled through the archway, the darkness behind them heaving in fury. Shadows lashed out, clawing at their ankles, desperate to pull them back. Mark pushed forward, heart pounding fiercely in his chest. Emily's small hand gripped his tightly, her terror palpable. Sarah followed closely, both fear and determination etched on her face. As they emerged into what looked like an endless corridor, the walls shifted, vibrating with a sinister life of their own. The flickering light from the cymbals faded, leaving them cloaked in a consuming darkness. The corridor stretched on, an oppressive tunnel that seemed to ripple and pulse with an unseen heartbeat. The air was thick, drenched in a scent that was both familiar and nauseating, like rust mixed with sweet decay. "Keep moving," Mark urged, not daring to look back. He could feel the weight of something monstrous lingering closely, and while fear stung at his heels, fear for his daughter drove him forward. Every instinct called him to safety. "Mark, what do we do?" Sarah's breathless question broke through the intense silence, but there was no answer. They needed to find a way out. But the shadows twisted and warped around them, mockingly trapping them. Suddenly, a shrill howl echoed down the corridor, chilling him to the bone. It was a sound that resonated with a deep, primal fear. Mark turned, and for a fleeting moment, he saw a figure barely discernible among the swirling shadows, its grotesque form writhing, hungry. "Run!" he screamed again, urging his legs to move faster. But the sound of shuffling feet behind them grew louder, relentless. As they dashed deeper into the corridor, a series of doors appeared, their wooden surfaces gnarled and aged, etched with symbols he couldn't understand. Mark hesitated, grasping for any sense of direction. Behind them, the howling intensified, a cacophony of despair. They could not go back. "Emily, do you see anything?" he asked, trying to suppress the rising panic in his tone. "Yes. There." She pointed ahead with a trembling finger. A door stood ajar, its wood splintered, barely clinging to its hinges. Desperation surged through Mark, and even as something deep inside warned him of the unknown, he pushed the door wide open. They plunged inside, stumbling into a dimly lit room lined with dusty shelves filled with weathered books and forgotten memories. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of old paper and mildew filled his nostrils. Emily coughed, covering her mouth. "Is this a library?" Sarah wondered aloud, glancing around warily. The room felt alive, every creak of the floorboards echoing like a scream in the absolute silence. Mark spotted a single lantern flickering atop a massive desk near the far wall. Among the clutter scattered on its surface, he saw a strange object, a small, polished box, its surface gleaming ominously. He stepped closer, curiosity battling with dread. The box pulsed with an odd energy, beckoning him. But as he reached for it, an overwhelming sensation flooded him, a wave of memories crashing like a ripped tide. Images flashed before his eyes, faces he'd forgotten, voices fading into the background. An ominous whisper crawled along his spine, seeping into his thoughts. You should be left it alone. Suddenly, the door crashed shut behind them with a force that rattled the room. Mark spun around, his heart racing, knowing they were not alone. The howling from the corridor continued, now mingled with low, guttural sounds that sent chills straight down his spine. Do you feel that? Emily whimpered, her small voice barely above a whisper. It's coming for us. Mark turned, gripping her shoulder. We have to find a way out. There has to be another exit. The shadows shifted, curling toward them like tendrils of smoke, hungry and alive. The box pulsed again, and with it came an unbearable temptation to look deeper, to understand the history behind the aura surrounding it. In that moment, he felt a choice linger in the air, one that could either lead them to salvation or doom. Open it, a voice hissed from the darkness, promising answers that Mark felt he didn't want to hear. Would surrendering to the dark pull of the box mean finding a way out, or tethering himself further into its sinister grasp? Mark hesitated, caught between fear and desperation. As he reached for the box, a chilling question slithered from the depths of his mind: what will it cost? And somewhere in the corner of the room, the shadows echoed an answer that made his stomach drop: everything. Mark's fingers hovered over the polished surface of the box, an electric thrum pulsing beneath his skin. Every instinct screamed at him to pull away, yet an unseen force urged him forward, luring him into the trap the shadows had laid. Dad, don't! Emily's voice trembled beside him, pulling him from the abyss of his dread-fueled curiosity. But it was too late. His fingertips brushed against the box, and in that instant, a wave of images flooded his mind. Shattered dreams. Whispered regrets. Faces blurred by time, their eyes hollow and pleading. He recoiled as the whispers sharpened, the shadows surrounding him growing bolder, reaching for him with clawing fingers. Open it, the voice breathed again, more insistent, as if the darkness itself was giving life to its desires. Mark! Sarah shouted, her eyes wide with panic. You have to stop. We don't know what it is. He ripped his hand back, but it was too late. The weight of the choice crushed him, bearing down like the heavy air around them. Look up! Emily cried, pointing toward the ceiling. A dark mass churned in the corner, writhing like a gathering storm cloud. As it coalesced, features began to form, sinuous fingers reaching down, twisted faces howling in rage. His heart pounded as the shadows moaned their despair, echoing the cries of the tormented. It's angry! Sarah shouted, grabbing Mark's arm. We have to get out of here. Then let us try the door. Mark replied, his voice breaking with urgency as he moved toward the door, but when he reached it, it remained solid, unwavering and impenetrable, as if the room itself had swallowed the exit. The oppressive air thickened, squeezing the breath from their lungs. Emily clutched his waist, looking up at him with wide, terrified eyes. They don't want us to leave. Just then, the box began to shake violently on the desk, rattling against the wood with a sinister rhythm. In the dim lantern light, he could see ancient symbols etched into its surface, twisting and coiling like live serpents. Oh God, what did I do? Mark breathed, backing away, but the shadows were faster. They surged forward like a black tide, wrapping around his legs, pulling him down. Mark! Sarah screamed as she lunged for him, but a wave of darkness crashed between them. The room exploded with noise, howling, whispers, shattering glass. Mark felt himself being dragged, the floorboards creaking beneath him like bones snapping underfoot. No! No! He clawed at the ground, fighting the invisible grip, but it was relentless. He could barely see Emily as she struggled to remain upright, fear etched deep into her features. You have to fight it. Please. The walls began to shimmer, warping and twisting in a spiral of torment. With one last desperate surge of strength, Mark thrust his hand towards the box, a primal instinct igniting within him. If you want the truth, show me. he roared, and the box exploded open. A blinding light shot outward, illuminating the room with a radiant glow, scattering the shadows momentarily. But that light didn't bring warmth. Instead, it carried an icy chill, as if the box itself had unleashed a fragment of hell. Mark's eyes widened in horror as faces emerged from that light, not just faces, but figures trapped in endless agony, crying out for salvation. The air turned frigid and acrid, each breath a struggle. "It wants payment," Sarah gasped. "We have to give it something." "What? What does it want?" Mark yelled over the cacophony, but the shadows surged back, and despair clawed at his mind. In that moment, he realized the truth: their escape was no longer guaranteed, and the dark force craved not merely blood or flesh but the very essence of their humanity. As the cacophony of voices spiraled out of control, Mark felt the desperate flicker of hope dimming, snuffing out like a candle in a storm. A wave of hands clawed toward him, and he understood they were not just angry, they were hungry, ravenous for the living. The shadows swelled, hungry and insatiable. Mark thrashed against the grip, laughter wounding his ears as the whispers turned to howls, but then he noticed something just beyond the chaos. The walls flickered twice like a heartbeat. "No," he breathed, as the realization hit. "It's a map, it's a way out." But could he risk everything they had left? With the shadows closing in, he remembered Emily's innocent face, the light of his choices mirrored in her gaze. The box still pulsed with energy, shadows swirling like a tempest around him. They were fighting to claim them, their last refuge beneath a sea of despair. He had to choose. "Mark!" Emily's voice pierced through the noise. "Please. We can't stay here." The shadows grasped tighter, thirsting for their fear. And amid the chaos, the choice remained: stay and learn the truth, or forge a desperate escape into the unknown. Would making that choice cost them everything? The final howl enveloped them, suffocating. What haunted them would soon reveal its final face, but could it offer salvation or merely damnation? As the darkness surged, dying screams echoing from the box spun Mark into a maelstrom of terror and resolve. He grasped Emily's hand tighter, feeling her small fingers tremble against his palm. Her terrified eyes mirrored his own mortal dread. "Mom! Daddy!" Emily cried, her voice rising through the chaos. "We have to go. We can't be here." Mark fought to catch his breath, throat dry and constricted. With his heart racing, he locked eyes with Sarah, who was almost swallowed by the shadows. He could see the weariness etched in her features, the hopelessness hovering like specters, but behind it, a flicker of relentless spirit burned bright. "Mark, what are we waiting for?" Sarah shouted, a fierce determination igniting behind her eyes, urging him to act. "Look, the walls!" Mark exclaimed urgently, pointing towards the flickering patterns. "It's showing us the way. We need to trust it." "Can we even trust anything here?" Sarah questioned, fear and conviction battling in her voice. "There's no choice. It's our only shot," he yelled, adrenaline coursing like fire through his veins. The shadows advanced, a creeping tide of despair, and for a moment, Mark hesitated. Those fragments of souls clawed for his attention. "I won't give in," he roared, the force behind his voice almost pushing the shadows back. Then, without warning, the walls turned into a swirling blur, and a rippling path illuminated among the darkness. With a desperate push, he darted towards it, pulling Emily in close, and urging Sarah to follow. "Now! This way!" The corridor spun into chaos as they sprinted down that shimmering passage, a blinding brightness enveloping them, the echoes of the tortured souls fading into the distance. But the shadows didn't relent, they surged close behind, a gnashing, ravenous storm. Mark darted forward, feet pounding against the unforgiving ground, heart thrumming against his ribcage like a war drum urging him on. They emerged from the swirling corridor, bursting into stark daylight. A wave of fresh air embraced them, a stark contrast to the suffocating darkness they had just escaped. The sun hung brightly in a cerulean sky, birds chirping sweet melodies around them. But Mark's heart sank. The familiar streets of their neighborhood stretched out before them, an illusory facade of peace. "Is this real?" Sarah whispered, disbelief washing over her. "Breathe." "It has to be," Mark urged, scanning their surroundings, his mind racing as the weight of what they had just endured began to settle. "But we need to stay vigilant. Whatever that was, it won't stop just because we're out. Emily tightened her grip, her little face pale. Will he come for us again? She asked, voice trembling. No, Mark reassured, kneeling to her level, his heart breaking at the sight of her fear. We faced it. Together. And now we know, we'll always choose to fight whatever shadows come our way. As they took a moment, the sight of their home felt foreign. Yet, the comfort of each other in that moment reminded them they were stronger than the weight of the past. But deep within, shadows still lingered, a reminder of their brush with something far darker than they had ever known. The weight of the shadows would not vanish simply because they had emerged. They could never forget the truths awakened in that darkness, nor the souls entwined with their fates. In that moment, they understood. They wouldn't run from darkness again, they would learn to face it. Together. Let us go home, Mark finally said, rising with renewed strength. He grasped Emily's hand, intertwining their fingers. The walk toward home felt heavy, but the lingering beauty of light rekindled hope. And as they entered their house, the familiarity swept over them like a warm blanket, the shadows receding for now, but their journey was far from over. As the door clicked shut, and a cool breeze wafted through the open window, Mark turned to Sarah, knowing the shadows they faced could return at any moment. They would not let it define them. Let us make sure we're ready when it does, he resolved, embracing both Sarah and Emily tightly as the sunlight poured through the window, illuminating the path forward. As they stood united in that fragile moment, the air shimmered, a gentle reminder that darkness could never overshadow the resilience of their love. Soon, they would find the strength to face the haunting whispers of the past. But for now, they were home. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how this story ends. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Let us keep this thing going.